Welcome on board, chosen one. Let's not pretend anymore. Let's not soften it. Let's not lie to make fragile egos comfortable. They said you were nothing special. They said you were too quiet, too intense, too much, or not enough. They said, "Look at them now," with that little smirk, like the story was already finished. They said you peaked early. They said you missed your chance. They said the legend needs to bow. Funny thing is, they said all of that before the universe finished writing your next chapter. Look at where you're standing now, not celebrating, not begging, not chasing, just standing there, calm, unreadable, dangerous in the quiet way. And look at them, watching, whispering, suddenly careful with their words, suddenly respectful in private, even if their mouth still runs in public. That shift didn't happen by accident. That silence after the storm is not peace, it's shock. Here's a cold fact they don't want to admit. The people who laughed the loudest were the first to realize something changed. The people who underestimated you felt it before you did. When they said your name recently, it didn't sound the same anymore. Less mocking, more nervous. Because they can sense what's coming, even if they don't understand it. And what's coming is not small. Your next relationship is not going to make sense to anyone who still sees you through an old version of you. That's why it's going to shock everyone. Not because of drama, not because of chaos, but because of contrast. The gap between who they thought you were and who you walk beside next is going to be embarrassing for them. Before we go deeper, press like and subscribe, not for the algorithm. Do it as payment. Payment for truth, people. Avoid saying out loud, "You're part of this mission now." Back to it. You've lived through the phase where you felt invisible, where you gave more than you received, where you explained yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You watched others get chosen faster, loved louder, celebrated sooner. You smiled through it, but inside you were asking the question nobody heard. What's wrong with me? Nothing was wrong with you. That's the part nobody warned you about. The universe wasn't delaying you, it was refining you. Every rejection, every quiet exit, every relationship that fell apart without closure was teaching you one thing: discernment. You were being trained to recognize depth, not noise, truth, not chemistry, stability, not chaos, dressed up as passion. Here's why your next relationship will feel unreal. You won't chase it, you won't force it, you won't announce it early. It will slip into your life so naturally that one day you'll look around and realize the world feels quieter, safer, sharper. And when people finally notice who you're with, the reaction will be priceless. Oh, that's who they ended up with. Since when did they move like that? When did this happen? It happened while they were busy replaying an old version of you that no longer exists. Let me tell you something people hate admitting. The strongest connections are formed after someone has been broken enough to stop performing. You're not walking into love as a beggar anymore. You're walking in as someone who knows what peace costs. That changes everything. Your next person won't love you for potential. They'll recognize completion. They won't test you. They won't play power games. They'll feel familiar, not because you knew them before, but because they speak the same emotional language you were forced to learn alone. And yes, the enemy will feel it. The ones who ghosted, the ones who chose someone else, the ones who thought you'd always be available, they'll feel it when your energy doesn't reach for them anymore, when your silence doesn't ask questions, when your happiness looks private and protected. That's when regret shows up. Quiet, late, useless. This isn't revenge. This is consequence. You're not here to prove anything now. You're here to live differently. And that's why this relationship hits harder than any argument ever could. It closes chapters without explanations. It answers questions without words. It shows instead of tells. Years from now, someone will say they changed after that. They'll be right. They just won't know why. The universe didn't bring you this far to hand you something ordinary. What's next matches the strength you had to build in silence. And when it arrives, when you realize who it is and how effortlessly it fits, you'll understand why everything before had to fall apart. Stand still, let it come. The shock is part of the design. Chosen one, this part is not for everyone. This is where the noise drops off, and only the ones who feel what's coming stay locked in. What we're about to break down step by step is the reason your next relationship won't look normal, won't feel familiar, and definitely won't make sense to people who still see you as who you used to be. This is not about chasing love. This is about alignment, about timing, about the universe lining up something so unexpected that it rewrites the story people thought they knew about you. If you're still here, it means something in you already knows this isn't random. You didn't end up here by accident. There's a reason the past had to clear out the way it did. There's a reason silence, distance, and isolation shaped you before connection ever showed up. The next person who enters your life won't meet the old you. They'll meet the version that survived the quiet and came back sharper. So, if you're ready to see how this unfolds, mark it. Drop 777 in the comments. Not as a ritual, not as a trend, but as a signal that you're staying to the end because you feel the pull. Because you know this next relationship isn't just surprising, it's strategic. Now, stay focused. We're about to break this down step by step, and once it clicks, you won't unsee it. Number 1. The reflection that exposed them and finally woke you up. They didn't lose you, they lost access. Read that again. Slowly. Let it sting where it needs to sting. This is the part of the story where the enemy starts sweating, because this connection you're stepping into is not soft, not cute, not accidental. It's a mirror they avoided their whole lives. And the cruel joke is this. You didn't go looking for it. You didn't demand it. You didn't force it. It showed up anyway, right on time, holding up a reflection so sharp it slices through every lie they told about you. They said you were hard to love. They said you asked for too much. They said your standards were unrealistic. What they really meant was, you make us uncomfortable because you see too clearly. Most people choose relationships that feel safe because they're shallow, predictable texts, predictable roles, predictable endings, no growth required, no truth demanded, just comfort dressed up as connection. That's the lane your enemies stayed in. That's why they never evolved. And that's why they could never keep up with you. You, on the other hand, kept feeling that pressure inside, that low hum that said, this isn't it, this can't be it. You tried to ignore it, you tried to settle, you tried to convince yourself that numb was normal. But the universe doesn't let certain people stay asleep. It keeps turning the volume up until silence becomes unbearable. Here's the part nobody warned you about. The right connection doesn't just reflect your beauty. It reflects your fears, your habits, your blind spots. It shows you the version of yourself you've been postponing. And that scares people who are committed to staying small. That's why they ran. That's why they mocked. That's why they said you were too intense. Intensity is only a problem when someone has no depth. Let's be brutally honest. The enemy didn't misunderstand you. They understood you perfectly. That's why they tried to shrink you. Because when someone stands next to you and sees their own emptiness reflected back, the easiest defense is dismissal. Oh, look who thinks they're special. Oh, the legend needs to bow. That sarcasm wasn't confidence, it was panic. And now, look at the shift. Your next relationship doesn't mirror your past. It exposes it. It answers questions you stopped asking out loud. Why did things always feel one-sided? Why did you outgrow people so fast? Why did love feel like work instead of expansion? The answer is simple and ruthless. You were always ahead of the room. This is why the connection coming toward you will shock everyone. Not because it's flashy, but because it's equal. Because the person who steps into your life won't be threatened by your growth. They won't compete with you. They won't need you to play small so they can feel tall. They'll recognize the fire and bring their own. And yes, that terrifies the enemy, because now they have to live with the truth. They didn't reject you. They failed the test. They were never meant to go where you're going. They mistook access for ownership and comfort for compatibility. And when the mirror finally showed up, they looked away. You didn't. That's the difference. You asked yourself the questions others avoid. What patterns do I repeat? Why do I attract the same lessons? What part of me is still hiding? That self-confrontation is rare, painful, necessary, and it's exactly why the universe trusted you with something deeper. Let me answer the question sitting heavy in your chest right now. Why did it take so long? Because shallow love arrives fast. Real alignment takes pressure, time, isolation. You had to be stripped of distractions to see yourself clearly enough to be seen by the right person. This connection is not here to complete you. It's here to meet you, to challenge you, to activate parts of you that were dormant because nobody before could reach that level. That's why it feels intense already, even if it hasn't fully arrived yet. You're sensing it, the shift, the readiness, the calm confidence replacing the old hunger. And here's the final gut punch for the enemy. They'll recognize the change before you announce anything. They'll feel it when your energy stops leaking, when your attention no longer circles back, when your silence doesn't ask for validation. They'll see you reflected in someone else's eyes and realize too late what they were standing next to. You're not here to teach them a lesson. Life already did that. You're here because your next relationship is built on truth, not performance, depth, not convenience, presence, not potential. And once it locks in, the shock won't be loud. It'll be quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people rethink every joke they made about you. This mirror didn't come to flatter you. It came to finish you. Number 2. The aftermath they never recover from. They expected you to stay the same. That was their final mistake. This is where the real shockwave hits. Not loud, not chaotic, just undeniable. The kind of shift that makes rooms feel smaller when you walk in and conversations stop when your name comes up. Your next relationship is not a surprise because of who they are on paper. It's a surprise because of who you become the moment it enters your life. That's the part nobody prepares for. That's the part the enemy never survives. You're not stepping into something familiar. You're stepping into something that breaks the old script clean in half. This person doesn't match your past. They don't trigger your old wounds for entertainment. They don't reward your people-pleasing or tolerate your self-betrayal. They meet you where you are now, not where you were bleeding before, and that alone changes everything. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of your previous connections survived because they benefited from your confusion, from your softness without boundaries, from your habit of explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. This one won't play that game. They won't tiptoe around your limits. They'll respect them, test them, sharpen them, not to control you, but to call you forward. That's why it feels intense. That's why it feels unsettling at first. Real growth never feels gentle. Anything that wakes you up rattles the cage first. You feel exposed because you are, not weak, seen. There's a difference, and most people never learn it. Let's talk about the enemy for a second, the ones who watched you struggle, the ones who assumed your softness meant weakness. They thought you'd always be available, always accessible, always slightly behind them. This shift ruins that illusion, because now you don't react the same. You don't chase clarity, you don't negotiate your worth, you don't over-explain your silence. They'll say you changed, they'll say you're cold, they'll say you're acting different. Good. Different is the point. This relationship doesn't just add something to your life, it removes what never belonged there. Old habits, old reactions, old emotional loops. You stop asking questions that kept you stuck. You stop replaying conversations. You stop shrinking your truth to keep the peace. That's the shockwave. Quiet, permanent, devastating to anyone who relied on the old version of you. And yes, it scares you at first. Of course it does. Anything real threatens the comfort of your patterns. You're used to surviving, not standing fully seen. You're used to carrying depth alone. When someone finally meets you there, it doesn't feel romantic at first. It feels like pressure, like exposure, like nowhere to hide. That's how you know it's different. This connection doesn't distract you from yourself. It confronts you with yourself. It mirrors your discipline, your boundaries, your hunger for more. It doesn't rescue you. It challenges you to show up as the person you already became in private. That's why the universe waited. That's why the timing had to be exact. Here's a fact people hate hearing. The strongest relationships don't feel intoxicating at the start. They feel clarifying, grounding, almost too real. There's no chase because there's no confusion. There's no performance because there's no audience. Just alignment snapping into place like it always belonged there. That's what shocks people. They expected fireworks and chaos. They expected you to repeat the cycle. Instead, they see calm, focus, certainty. They see you choosing someone without explaining it, without seeking approval, without broadcasting it for validation. That silence drives them insane, because they know, they feel it. Whatever this is, it's not temporary. You'll notice it too. The way your nervous system settles, the way your words land cleaner, the way your standards feel non-negotiable instead of defensive. You stop questioning whether you're asking for too much, because the right person never makes you feel that way. They rise to the level, or they're simply not in the room. This is where the enemy loses all leverage. They can't guilt you. They can't provoke you. They can't bait you with nostalgia. The shockwave already passed. The ground already shifted, and they're standing on a version of reality that no longer includes you. Let me answer what you're thinking right now. Why does this feel like the end of something? Because it is. Not an ending in the dramatic sense, an ending in the evolutionary sense. The chapter where you learn through pain is closing. The chapter where you choose through clarity is opening. This relationship isn't here to save you. It's here because you don't need saving anymore. That's why it shocks everyone. That's why it silences doubters. That's why it hits the enemy where excuses live. They didn't expect you to become this solid. They didn't expect the universe to back you this cleanly. They didn't expect you to stop surviving and start selecting. And now there's nothing left to say. The shockwave already did the talking. Number 3. When the old you collapses and takes their lies with it. Their biggest mistake was assuming you'd stay recognizable. That's the line that ends this phase. Sit with it. This is the moment everything they thought they knew about you starts falling apart in real time. Not dramatically, not with announcements, quietly, systematically. The old version of you doesn't explode, it expires. And that terrifies people who built their confidence on predicting you. You feel it first, long before anyone else does. A strange restlessness, a refusal to repeat yourself, a low tolerance for habits that once felt normal. You start questioning things you used to defend. Why did I accept that? Why did I explain myself there? Why did I stay quiet when I knew better? These aren't doubts, they're withdrawals. You're detoxing from an identity that kept you small enough to be digestible. Here's the part nobody warns you about. When growth is real, it feels like loss before it feels like power. You mourn versions of yourself you survived with. Coping mechanisms, emotional armor, familiar pain. Letting go of them feels dangerous, even when you know they're outdated. That's why most people never evolve. They mistake familiarity for safety. But you didn't. Imagine this. You're walking out of a building you lived in for years, and halfway down the street, you realize the lights inside went off. You didn't flip the switch. You didn't announce your exit. The structure just stopped holding you. That's what's happening now. The world keeps looking for you in places you no longer occupy. And here's where the shock sharpens. The relationship forming in your life isn't creating this change. It's revealing it. It's acting like a spotlight, exposing everything you already outgrew but hadn't fully shed. That's why it doesn't feel romantic in the shallow sense. It feels surgical, honest, unavoidable. It cuts away illusions, not comfort. Not everyone who loses you will understand why. Good. Understanding was never the requirement. People who underestimated you are starting to feel uneasy, even if they can't name it. Eye contact feels heavier, conversations feel shorter, jokes don't land the same. That's because the version of you they learned how to handle no longer exists. And the new one doesn't ask for permission. Imagine this. You've been speaking a language everyone around you understands, and overnight you switch dialects. Same voice, same face, different frequency. The people who relied on predicting your reactions suddenly can't keep up. That confusion reads as distance. That distance reads as threat. They'll say you're acting strange. They'll say you've changed since meeting someone. They'll say you're being influenced. No, you're being unlocked. This is where the old narratives start collapsing. The idea that you needed fixing, that you were too sensitive, too intense, too complicated. Those labels were survival tools for people who couldn't meet you where you were headed. When your old self falls away, their excuses fall with it. Here's a truth that cuts deep. Most people don't miss you. They miss the version of you that made them comfortable, the one who overgave, the one who waited, the one who absorbed confusion quietly. When that version disappears, they feel exposed, and exposure makes cowards loud. Growth looks like betrayal to people who benefited from your silence. Let that land. This is why the shock around your next relationship is unavoidable. The world expected romance, they expected attachment, they expected distraction. What they got instead was transformation. You're not being swept away. You're standing firmer than ever. That contrast rattles everyone watching from the outside. Imagine this, a chessboard mid-game, and suddenly you realize the piece everyone thought was a pawn was never playing that role. It moves differently, thinks differently, ends games. That realization hits too late for the opponent. That's the energy shift happening now. You might be asking yourself something quietly. Why does this feel lonely, even though something good is happening? Because shedding skins is a solitary act. The space between who you were and who you're becoming is always quiet. Crowds don't survive transitions. Only witnesses do. And here's the irony: the more your old self dissolves, the clearer everything becomes. Your standards stop sounding defensive, your boundaries stop needing explanations, your intuition stops whispering and starts speaking in full sentences. You don't crave validation because you finally recognize alignment. This relationship doesn't distract you from growth, it demands it. It doesn't romanticize your wounds, it respects your healing. It doesn't rush you, it meets you at pace. That's why it feels different. That's why it feels heavy in a good way, like responsibility instead of fantasy. Not every ending is loud, some just stop working. That's what's happening to your old self. It stopped working. Imagine this: you're wearing shoes that fit you perfectly for years, and one day they don't. They haven't changed. You have. Forcing yourself back into them would hurt. That pain is the signal, not to endure, but to evolve. The people who underestimated you won't ask questions, they'll make assumptions. It's easier than admitting they misjudged you, but you'll notice the shift, the way they watch you more than they speak, the way your calm unsettles them, the way your absence feels louder than your presence ever did. This is where revelation replaces romance. You're not here to be adored, you're here to be aligned, and alignment is ruthless. It removes what doesn't match without drama, without explanation, without guilt. That's why this change feels sudden to outsiders. They weren't paying attention to the internal work. You were. Let me answer the question, forming right now. Is this permanent? Yes. Not the relationship itself, but you. Once you see yourself clearly, you don't unsee it. Once you experience connection without self-abandonment, you don't go back. Once your old self falls away, you don't rebuild it out of nostalgia. And that's the final shock. They expected you to circle back. They expected you to stay reachable. They expected familiarity. What they got was evolution. Your old self didn't die, it graduated, and the world wasn't ready for what walked out instead. Number 4. The flame. They thought was gone, just stood back up. The fire didn't die, you just stopped feeding people who tried to use it. Let's kill one lie immediately. This person entering your life is not giving you power. They're not saving you. They're not completing you. That strength everyone suddenly notices was always yours. You didn't lose it. You hid it because the world punished you every time you showed it too early, too honestly, too raw. That fire didn't disappear. It went underground. Imagine this. A city thinks a volcano is dormant because it's quiet. No smoke, no noise, no warning. What they forget is that silence is not absence. Pressure builds in silence. Heat concentrates. And when it resurfaces, it doesn't ask permission. That's what's happening inside you now. This connection doesn't light the fire. It reminds you where you buried it. One look, one conversation, one moment where you realize you're not explaining yourself anymore. You're not negotiating your worth. You're not shrinking your opinions to keep peace. That's when it hits. The fire was never gone. You just stopped wasting it on people who couldn't handle the heat. Your decisions start changing. Not dramatically, decisively. You don't hesitate like before. You don't sit on maybes. Your yes is clean. Your no is final. Your voice lands heavier because it's not asking to be accepted. It's stating facts. Here's the part the enemy can't handle. You stop tolerating the bare minimum without making speeches about it. You simply walk away, calm, certain, unbothered. That scares people who relied on your patience to stay relevant. Imagine this: you've been whispering your whole life in rooms that demanded silence. Now you speak normally, and suddenly everyone thinks you're loud. You're not louder. The room just got smaller. You might be wondering, why does this feel dangerous? Because it is, to old dynamics, to weak attachments, to anyone who benefited from your self-doubt. Fire doesn't negotiate with ice. It melts it. This is why your next relationship shocks everyone. They expected you to dim again. Instead, you show up centered, sharp, awake. Not angry, not defensive, just done pretending. And once the fire returns, you don't beg anyone to stay warm. They either step back or they burn trying to touch what they never respected. Number 5. The version of you they can't read anymore. You didn't change. You just stopped translating yourself for people who refuse to listen. This is where it becomes obvious. Not to you first, but to everyone else. You walk the same streets. You speak with the same voice. But something is off in a way that makes people uncomfortable. They can't place it, and that's what scares them. You didn't lose yourself. You finally arrived. This person in your life is not a savior. Let's be clear about that. They didn't rescue you from anything. They simply stood still long enough for you to see what you'd already become. A mirror doesn't give you a new face. It shows you the one you were avoiding. And when that reflection locks in, there's no going back to pretending. Imagine this. You've been walking around with a dimmer switch on your own life, lowering your light so others don't feel exposed. One day, without drama, you turn it back to normal. Now everyone squints. Some shield their eyes. Some step away. That's not your problem. That's adjustment. The strength you hid starts showing in how you move. You don't rush. You don't over-explain. You don't chase reactions. Confidence stops being something you perform and starts being something people sense. The dreams you postponed don't feel far away anymore. They feel overdue, and that changes your posture, your tone, your patience. People notice. Of course they do. Some pause because they're recalculating who you are to them now. Some panic because they realize the version of you they could influence is gone. Some feel intimidated, not because you're aggressive, but because you're solid. Predictability made them comfortable. Clarity makes them nervous. Here's the truth hitting them in real time. They don't get access to this version unless you allow it, and most of them won't. You might wonder, why does this feel lonely even though I feel stronger? Because evolution doesn't travel in groups. The new you doesn't need applause, it needs alignment. And that's why your next relationship shocks everyone. They expected a repeat. They got a revelation. You didn't become unrecognizable because you changed masks. You became unrecognizable because you finally took it off. Number 6. The vision that makes them blink first. Clarity is dangerous to anyone who benefited from your confusion. This is the phase where everything sharpens, not emotionally loud, not chaotic, clean, focused, precise. The insecurities that once ran background noise in your head don't get fought anymore. They simply lose relevance. Doubt doesn't get conquered in a dramatic moment. It starves when it's no longer fed. Your old patterns don't shatter with noise. They crack quietly, like glass under pressure, and suddenly you realize you're standing in a clearer room. No mess, no drama, just space. And in that space, something rare happens. You finally know what you want without apologizing for it. Imagine this. You've been driving through fog for years, gripping the wheel, guessing the road, trusting instinct more than sight. Then the fog lifts. Same road, same speed, completely different control. That's clarity. And once you experience it, you never romanticize confusion again. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop explaining why your standards exist. You stop mistaking chemistry for compatibility. What you deserve becomes obvious. What you refuse to tolerate becomes final. There's no internal debate anymore. That inner courtroom closes. This version of you is magnetic, not because you're trying to attract anything, but because you're no longer leaking energy. Attention follows certainty. Possibility follows focus. People feel it before they understand it. And yes, the enemy feels it too. They notice you don't seek reassurance. You don't test the temperature. You don't ask for permission to take up space. That unsettles people who relied on your hesitation to stay relevant. They can't manipulate what they can't confuse. You might be thinking, why does this feel calm instead of exciting? Because chaos was never passion. It was uncertainty pretending to be intensity. Real clarity feels grounded, dangerous in a quiet way. This is why your next relationship shocks everyone. You don't fall into it, you select it. And when people see how sure you are, how unmoved you are, how little you explain, they realize something irreversible happened. You didn't become magnetic by adding something. You became magnetic by removing doubt. And once clarity locks in, there's nothing left for the old world to grab onto. Number 7, the moment you stop running from yourself. The scariest confrontation isn't with them, it's with the truth you kept dodging. This is where it stops being about connection and starts becoming unavoidable. This relationship doesn't argue with you, it doesn't accuse you, it doesn't demand explanations. It simply places you face to face with yourself and refuses to blink. And that's terrifying for a reason. Every interaction peels something back, not gently, honestly. A fear you buried because it made others uncomfortable. A dream you postponed because you were told to be realistic. A strength you downplayed because it threatened weaker egos. None of it stays hidden anymore. Not because this person digs for it, but because being around them makes pretending exhausting. Imagine this. You've been walking past a locked door in your own house for years, telling yourself it's not important. One day, you realize it was never locked. You were just scared of what you'd find inside. That's this phase. The door opens and there's no monster, just power you avoided claiming. You might ask yourself, why does this feel intense if nothing bad is happening? Because liberation doesn't feel safe at first. It feels destabilizing. Your old identity depended on avoidance. Growth demands presence, and presence removes excuses. Here's the part people around you notice before you say a word. You stop deflecting. You stop laughing things off. You stop pretending you don't care. Not because you're angry, but because you're honest. That honesty hits harder than any confrontation ever could. Most people fear being seen. You feared seeing yourself. And now you can't unsee it. This relationship doesn't become the headline. Your transformation does. The way you stand firmer, the way your choices stop wobbling, the way your silence feels intentional instead of uncertain. People sense the shift and don't know how to respond to it. Because once you face yourself fully, there's nothing left to hide behind. And nothing more dangerous than someone who finally knows who they are. Number 8. The moment they realize you're no longer the same species. They didn't watch you grow, they watched you arrive. This is where the shift becomes visible, and there's no hiding it anymore. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you simply move differently. There's intention behind your steps now, presence in your silence, awareness in your decisions. The fire that once felt wild has sharpened into clarity, and clarity has turned into power that doesn't need to prove itself. You walk into rooms without scanning for approval. You speak without softening your truth. You decide without checking who might be uncomfortable. That's not arrogance, that's alignment, and people feel it instantly. Imagine this. You've been watching someone through fog for years, convinced you knew their shape. Then the fog lifts, and you realize you were wrong about the size, the strength, the direction. That moment of recalibration is happening all around you now. You finally understand something that used to haunt you. You were never too much, never too intense, never too quiet. You were simply standing in front of the wrong eyes. And when the right eyes finally meet yours, they don't flinch. They don't try to own you. They don't try to fix you. They challenge you. They pull the strongest version of you forward and refuse to let you shrink back. Comfort was the enemy all along. Comfort made you negotiable. Comfort kept you explaining. Comfort taught people how little effort they needed to give you. This relationship burns that illusion to the ground. Layer by layer, the old version peels away. Not violently, inevitably. Habits dissolve. Fear loosens its grip. You don't force growth. You evolve, and evolution doesn't ask permission. The people who underestimated you feel it the hardest. Confusion first, then intimidation, then silence. They built their confidence on an outdated version of you. Now they're standing in front of someone they can't categorize, can't control, can't predict. You didn't break free by fighting them. You broke free by outgrowing the room. And that's the shift they can't undo. Number 9. The shock hits you first, and that's what destroys them. The real surprise was never who stood beside you, it was who stood up inside you. Here's the truth most people get wrong. The shock everyone talks about isn't public, it's private. It happens on an ordinary day, in a quiet moment, when you catch your reflection and feel something snap into place. Not excitement, recognition. You don't barely recognize yourself because you're lost. You barely recognize yourself because you're finally clear. This relationship doesn't rescue you. It doesn't drag you out of darkness. It doesn't hand you confidence like a gift. It does something far more dangerous. It wakes you up. And once you're awake, there's no going back to pretending you didn't see what you saw. Imagine this. You've been living in a house with dim lights for years, memorizing furniture by feel. One day, the lights turn on. Same house, same walls, completely different control. That's the shock, not change, awareness. You realize you were never broken, never behind, never missing anything. You were simply dormant, waiting, conserving energy for the moment it actually mattered. This person didn't light the fire for you. They struck the match against something that was already soaked in fuel. And when the fire starts, it doesn't burn outward first. It burns through you. Old doubts turn to ash. Old fears lose authority. Old stories about who you are stop sounding believable. The fire doesn't destroy you. It purifies you. You might wonder, why does this feel intense but calm at the same time? Because panic comes from confusion. This comes from truth. You're not scrambling anymore. You're choosing. Here's the part that wrecks the enemy. They expected your shock to look like chaos. Instead, it looks like control, like peace, like someone who knows exactly who they are and no longer needs approval to exist. This is the real shock. Not what the world sees, but what you finally do. And once that fire finishes its work, there's nothing left in you that can be owned, manipulated, or dimmed again. Number 10. The exit they never thought you'd find. This wasn't where you arrived. This was where you stopped waiting. Let's be precise here. This connection was never the finish line. That's the misunderstanding that keeps people weak. It wasn't meant to complete you, anchor you, or define your future. It was a doorway. And doorways don't ask you to stay. They ask you to walk through. What's on the other side is a life most people never touch. Quiet power, sharp clarity, decisions made without apology. You stop shrinking your presence to keep rooms comfortable. You stop choosing what feels familiar over what feels right. You stop asking permission to take up space in your own life. Imagine this. You've been standing in a hallway for years, convincing yourself it was the room, decorating it, adjusting to it. One day, you realize it was never meant to be lived in. It was meant to be passed through. That realization alone changes how you move forever. Here's the part that scares people watching you. Your transformation doesn't depend on whether this person stays. That's the real power shift. You're not clinging, you're not bargaining, you're not afraid of loss. What woke up inside you belongs to you. And once something is claimed, it doesn't go back to sleep. You start choosing yourself fully, not selfishly, fully. You don't abandon connection, but you no longer sacrifice yourself for it. You don't chase certainty because you are certainty. That's when life starts responding differently. People will assume you became cold. You didn't. You became intentional. You became selective. You became dangerous to anyone who relied on your hesitation. Here's the question you might be asking quietly. What if this door closes? It won't. Doors like this don't close. Once you step through, you carry the threshold with you. This was never about them. It was about access. And now that you've crossed it, there's no version of your old life that can call you back. Number 11, the ascent that leaves them speechless. They're not shocked because you changed. They're shocked because you didn't ask permission. This is where you stop bracing and start moving. No rush, no noise, just breath, posture, direction. You rise without announcing it, and somehow everyone feels it anyway. The shock isn't something you perform. It happens to the people still stuck in old versions of you. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them replay memories, trying to figure out when they lost control of the narrative. Their disbelief isn't confusion. It's evidence. Evidence that you evolved past the version of you they memorized. Imagine this. You've been walking uphill for so long that standing straight feels like rebellion. Now you're on level ground, breathing easier, seeing farther. The ones still climbing think you cheated. You didn't. You just kept going when it got quiet. This rise doesn't look dramatic. It looks steady, calm, dangerous in a way that doesn't need volume. You don't explain your choices anymore. You don't soften your truth. You don't slow down to make others feel included. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Here's the truth they're not ready for. You don't need validation to move forward now. You don't need applause to know you're aligned. You don't need approval to choose what's next. And that independence rattles anyone who relied on your self-doubt to feel tall. You might feel it in your body already, the grounded feeling, the absence of panic, the sense that whatever comes next, you'll handle it. That's readiness, not confidence borrowed from someone else. Confidence earned. If something shifted inside you while hearing this, mark the moment. Comment what hit you. Say who you're becoming, not for permission, for ownership. Your voice matters here because it's no longer asking to be heard. It's stating presence. The world isn't ready for the version of you that's stepping forward. That's fine. You are. And this time, you're not slowing down for anyone. Here's a closing section that lands clean, powerful, and inevitable without dragging or softening the ending. It seals the message, honors the journey, and leaves the chosen one standing tall, while the enemy fades out of frame. Number 12. The final silence after the shock. And after the noise dies down, only the truth remains. This is where it ends, not with fireworks, not with explanations, with silence. The kind of silence that follows something irreversible, the kind that settles after people realize there's nothing left to argue, question, or undo. You don't chase reactions anymore. You don't wait to be understood. You don't need the world to catch up to you. The shock already happened. The shift already locked in. What comes next doesn't need an audience. This next relationship didn't announce itself because it didn't need to. It didn't come to impress anyone watching. It came to align with who you became when no one was clapping. And now, whether people approve or not, is irrelevant. Their opinions expired the moment you stopped needing them. Imagine this: a storm passes and the land doesn't rush to explain itself. It just stands there, changed, stronger, clearer, unmoved by commentary. That's you now. Some people will keep talking about the old version of you. Let them. They're speaking from memory, not reality. Others will go quiet because they finally understand they misjudged you. That silence isn't awkward. It's respectful, even if they won't admit it. Here's the final truth. Your life doesn't need to make sense to anyone else. Your growth doesn't need witnesses. Your next chapter doesn't need approval. The universe already responded. That's all the confirmation required. You didn't win by proving them wrong. You won by moving on without them. So close the door gently, step forward calmly, and let the silence behind you speak louder than anything you could have said. The shock did its job. Now you live. And now, before you step away, let this settle. If something inside you shifted while hearing this, don't ignore it. That wasn't hype. That was recognition. The kind that only shows up when truth lands exactly where it's supposed to. You didn't come this far by accident, and you didn't hear this message for nothing. If this hit you, press like, subscribe, so you don't miss what comes next. Drop the number 777 in the comments to mark that you're stepping into this new chapter consciously, and share this with someone who's still waking up. The next phase is already moving. Make sure you're present for it.